Starfield, poised to become this year's biggest launch, perhaps even on par with Cyberpunk in terms of day one participation, with hopefully none of the customer support nightmare that went with it. We'll see. There's been plenty of talk recently regarding performance concerns on consoles. I mean a 30 FPS cap at a time when people were just starting to get used to the sweet nectar of 60, and even 120 FPS may or may not put a dent on the whole be who you want to be but in space experience. We'll get back to this along with the recommended system specs AMD put out a few days ago a little later. What I want to focus on today's video is the PC side of things and what may be needed to enjoy Starfield at 60 FPS, or maybe even just get it running at 720p at the very least. Just keep in mind that this entire content piece is meant to be academic at best. Basically, I want to have some interesting discussions about Space Skyrim for fun. Nothing in this video should be taken as buying advice. And if you're someone who's already rocking the best money can buy today, it may still interest you to stay and learn of Starfield's potential performance hurdles and why even a 4090 may not guarantee safe, stutter-free passage across the 1,000 or so planets. It would also make me less sad if you hung out for a bit too, so there's that. Timestamps are also in the video description if you need them. Mello, the official system requirements are already on the Steam store page. Starfield's not even out yet anyways. What are you doing? Go back to Warframe. System requirements, official or not, have oftentimes proven to be unreliable. Cyberpunk 2077, for example, as I'm making this video, still has a Radeon RX 590 listed as part of the recommended specs. Anyone who's played that game would tell you straight up that a mid-range graphics card from 2018 is insufficient, and no amount of computer horsepower is going to fix the ghosting and object pop-ins that plague Glitch City anyway. Though it is a lot less glitchy these days. Sure, you could probably get a fairly playable experience at 1080p with upscaling set to balanced or quality modes, but that's the problem right there. System requirements and other related info released by most game publishers often lacks context, like are the minimum and or recommended specs going to guarantee a 30 or 60 FPS experience? At what settings? What resolution? Games like Star Citizen that just list quad-core CPU with AVX support, which could mean anything from the early 2010s to a Core i3-12100 from last year, and I don't think Star Citizen runs very well anyways on anything in certain super CPU heavy locations in the game. Which, if I am wrong and you happen to be one of the few Star Citizen enjoyers I have come across, please do feel free to correct me down in the comments. With that said, game studios have been getting better at fleshing out those system requirements, but the point still stands that the info listed on Starfield's store page does not reveal the full picture. We'll do some cross comparisons later on with other bits of data to help determine if those requirements are reasonable, and if not, help closely approximate what you would possibly need to run Starfield at resolutions like 1080p and 4K. Hold up, if Starfield's only going to be running at 30 FPS on current gen Xbox consoles, and with how terrifically bad recent ports have turned out for the PC, is the actual game going to be something even playable for most players with oddest systems? Well, let's first take a look at what Bethesda had to say regarding the 30 FPS frame cap on consoles, and then take a closer look at how those compare to an average modern day gaming PC. I swear I'm not going to use the Steam survey this time. In an interview with IGN, Todd Howard, boss of Bethesda, explained, "I think it'll come as no surprise, given our previous games, what we go for. Always these huge open worlds, fully dynamic, hyper detail, where anything can happen. And we do want to do that. It's 4K in the X, it's 1440 on the S. We do lock it at 30 because we want that fidelity. We want all that stuff. We don't want to sacrifice any of it. Fortunately, in this one, we've got it running great. And then he goes on to say how the game often runs way above 30 FPS, sometimes 60, but they locked it down to 30 for the consistency. Feels great, they're really happy with how the game feels even in the heat of battle. CSGO players, when you tell them shooting at 30 FPS feels great. But really, I do understand the decision to go with a consistent frame-locked experience over somewhat smoother motion but with potentially erratic frame times, which would end up getting criticized in reviews anyways. But I don't know about you guys, with some of the phrasing, it feels like we're progressing a little too fast from "it's not a bug, it's a feature" to "it's not lagging, it's cinematic." And regarding the target resolution, the guys over at the Digital Foundry YouTube channel put out an analysis video not too long ago, and they figured that Starfield's probably running around 1200p based on some of the scenes shown in the Starfield Direct presentation. That's not even 1440p, which is Quad HD, a very popular resolution among many gamers these days. So we know how Starfield will probably run on the Xbox Series X and S consoles, but how do those machines stack up against a typical gaming PC? Let's take a look at the internals. Warning, this part is going to get a little technical, which if you do enjoy, then great, consider joining the Discord. Otherwise, I'll try to keep it short and simple. The Xbox Series X and S consoles are basically powered by an AMD CPU and GPU combo, an 8-core Zen 2 processor plus RDNA 2 graphics, with 12 teraflops of compute performance on the X, and 4 teraflops on the S, with 16 and 10 gigabytes of unified memory respectively. I know that's a little too simplified, and teraflops don't mean everything. I couldn't even tell you why GPUs are flopping about in them metal boxes, but for simple comparison sakes, a bigger number better. For those of you who have built computers, the Xboxes are basically running a gimped Ryzen 7 3700X with a GPU that's around a 1660 or RX 580 I believe for the Series S, and RX 6700 or RTX 2080 for the Series X. While the entry-level console may have modest specs at best compared to an equivalent gaming PC, the Series X is no slouch. Sure, it can't really run everything at 4K, but if you were to judge it by its ability to maintain 1440p or better, and then look at the Steam hardware survey where I can't believe the 1650 is back on top, good God, it kind of becomes concerning that 60 FPS locked isn't quite possible on arguably the fastest current gen console. Okay then, and let's see what AMD has to say in their new promo slide for Starfield. Surely, the manufacturer knows what's up and has everything figured out, right? DLSS? You don't need DLSS, what you need is a $900 graphics card. Okay, it is pretty clear that this slide is next to useless. AMD is just trying to push out their new stuff because a Ryzen 5 7600 for a heroic 1080p experience is absolutely insane. Who even does this marketing? It is, however, interesting to see that the older RX 6800 series is recommended for an epic 1440p experience, whatever that means. I'm gonna assume the words hardcore and high here mean good. This may be due to the fact that AMD has not been able to put anything together to fight the RTX 4070, like a child who can't figure out Legos. But the RX 6800 XT and non-XT are doing a good enough job of making NVIDIA look bad anyways. Right, the reason why I'd like to draw attention to this singular spec is that it somewhat lines up with the recommended system requirements on the Starfield Steam store page. Perhaps a Radeon RX 6800 or its NVIDIA equivalent would be sufficient for a solid maxed out 60 FPS experience at 1440 with no upscaling, provided there are no CPU bottlenecks, which we'll get to in just a bit. With that said, an RTX 2080, even if it was the TI variant, is no real match for a 6800 XT, unless we turn on ray tracing. Usually when a 2080 is listed alongside a GPU like the RX 6700 XT or 6800 XT, it points towards some form of ray tracing being implemented in the game. It will be interesting to see if that will end up being the case and how the improved creation engine handles something it could have never foresaw having to do, because it should have probably been retired, I don't know, 10 years ago. Okay, let's now take all the information and condense it into results. What do I think is the probable system requirements for just getting Starfield to run? I think it is safe to say that the game is going to be fairly CPU heavy, meaning no matter what graphics card you have, if the CPU is not strong enough to push the frame rate you desire, then that component will be the limiting factor. Usually, large open world games handling a ton of assets and having to keep track of all of them will have to rely on a strong processor to get the job done without any hitches. Like in Star Citizen, though, there are probably other contributing factors in that game. And you can get a hint of this with the Steam page requirements listing 6-core processors throughout, and the consoles all running 8-core Zen 2 CPUs, which, as I said before, are close to a Ryzen 7 3700X, though it may perform closer to a 3600 in some games. A Ryzen 5 2600 may be enough to get the game running alright at 1080p, probably not locked at 60 FPS in all scenarios though. A fairly fast quad-core may just be able to get the game running fine. It'll be interesting to see if those guys with their 4790Ks and 7700Ks, if any are left, are able to get Starfield up and running at a decent level of performance. So, a minimum of, let's say, an i3 10100 and a GTX 1650 or RX 474GB to get the game running at 1080p with somewhat playable frame rates, and a Ryzen 5 3600 or Core i5 10400F, I guess, paired with a GTX 1080 or RX 6600 for decent settings at 1080p, which is kinda close to what is listed on the Steam page, but again, we don't have the resolutions for those recommendations. And this is all purely my opinion. Please feel free to disagree down in the comments if you do so wish to. Totally fine. For a solid 1440p experience, I believe a Ryzen 5 5600X or Core i5 12600K at least is what you're going to need to get close to a guaranteed 60 FPS in all scenarios, considering that a Zen 2 processor in the consoles can only guarantee 30, and that's not even taking into account the dedicated hardware for asset decompression and custom NVMe storage. A Radeon RX 6800 or RTX 2080 Super should be sufficient, with perhaps some upscaling, assuming ray tracing will be a feature in the game. And if you're thinking about graphics mods at some point, then at the very minimum, 12GB of VRAM is what I would strongly recommend, as even Fallout 76, a game from about half a decade ago I think, due to the immense amount of assets, requires 12GB or more for some of the HD texture pack mods. For 4K, if the previously recommended CPUs are sufficient, then there is not a whole lot of reason to go higher for 60 FPS. A current gen i7 or i9 will still probably net you benefits, but that's only if the graphics side of things are taken care of, with something like a 3090 or 7900 XT or greater. If Starfield happens to be one of those games that just takes full advantage of the cache and the X3D AMD CPUs like in Flight Simulator and Assetto Corsa, then it is going to be a no-brainer, right? Maybe AMD has a reason for plugging the 7800 X3D in that slide over their more expensive 7900 or 7950X CPUs and the respective X3D variants. I guess we'll see how close or far I am with these requirements when Starfield finally arrives. What do you guys think? I don't expect it to turn into an absolute disaster like Lord of the Rings Gollum or be plagued with performance issues like Jedi Survivor. The creation engine is hopefully immune from Unreal Engine type stutters, but I'll just have to wait and see. Is there any hope for integrated graphics users? Maybe go check out Low Spec Gamer after Starfield comes out, I guess. There's a near 100% chance that there's gonna be performance mods at some point, but I really doubt Starfield's gonna run well, if at all, on even AMD integrated graphics, seeing as it won't be Steam Deck verified on launch. Later down the road was Todd Howard's response. Starfield is an absolutely breathtaking game in terms of visuals, and I don't use that word lightly. Sure, some scenes don't look all that great and the facial animations are probably not on the level of recent titles like Plague Tale Requiem or the Callisto Protocol, but the sheer beauty of space, fictional space at least, in my opinion was very well captured and portrayed in the trailer. If you're someone who's already gotten a machine set up and ready for Starfield, what's the first thing you're looking forward to doing in the game? Share your ideas. I promise I won't steal them for content purpose. I mean, who does that? Feel free to subscribe for potentially more Starfield content and join me on Discord. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Have a good day.